Read, play, learn spaces are so important because kids need to just bathe in books and early literacy development, and they need to have it all around them so that they feel and can just be immersed in learning wherever they are.
When you give them those opportunities, those brains just fire and get excited, and they get an attitude toward learning that is likely to create a lifelong desire to learn.
Replied her daddy.
We know it is never too early to start reading, singing, and talking to our children, and hopefully every child will have a better chance to grow up in a language-rich environment.
We are at the Vel R. Phillips Youth and Family Justice Center installing a Family Read, Play, and Learn Center. So when families are in the waiting areas, they have something to do with their children, to engage them, as well as maybe take some of the edge off of the stressfulness of the situation that they may be in.
We're all in agreement that the early years of life are some of the most formative for children, and the more that we can do to provide families with information and education around how important they are in their children's lives is kind of what we all believe.
We know that not everybody can make it to a brick and mortar library during open hours. So we're really excited for these kinds of opportunities in the community to connect with folks in a way that's convenient and easy for them.
We talk to families in our city and describe the situation and ask them to put themselves in those shoes and what would they want to look up and see. And so this really is a community and a collective effort, and I'm really proud of it.
Just to see a program that started in the laundromat, now come to family court, and hopefully what we launched today will just be the first reading space in a family court, and far from the last.
I hope all kinds of businesses and community organizations get involved with this initiative because it brings learning to families right where they are. It breaks down barriers and it increases access to early learning, which is critical for our children.
I'm so glad to welcome all of you to our 4th annual Too Small to Fail and Laundry Care Summit, reimagining together learning in everyday spaces. I want to thank the supporters who've made this virtual meeting possible: the David and Lucille Packard Foundation, the Heising Simmons Foundation, the William Penn Foundation, Allstate, Eastern Funding, and Lakeshore Learning. I'm very grateful to our Too Small to Fail team for their hard work in putting this event together, and as always, to everyone at the Laundry Cares Foundation for your wonderful partnership and leadership in promoting early learning and literacy. This work is really important now because the COVID pandemic has had a staggering impact on children and families over the last 18 months. Thousands of early learning programs and child care centers have been closed. Families have been dealing with economic insecurity and mental health issues. Young children are particularly vulnerable to serious learning loss at a time when their early brain development can least afford it. Research tells us that the first 5 years of life are critical for young children's early brain and language development, and that the best way to build young people's brains is for parents and caregivers to spend time engaging regularly by talking, reading, and singing with them every day. We know that environments in which children are growing up matter a great deal, and far too many children are growing up in environments not designed and built in ways that help them thrive. That's why I'm so proud of the work that Too Small to Fail has been doing to create more equitable access to fun, learning-rich environments and surrounding families with early learning opportunities that support language development. We've been doing this by meeting parents where they are in the everyday spaces and places that they go with their children, from the playground to the laundromat to the pediatric clinic. And over the course of the pandemic, we've increased our efforts in places like diaper banks and food distribution centers. The way we are able to do this work is by building cross-sector partnerships. I'll give you an example. In 2015, Too Small to Fail and the Laundry Cares Foundation announced a multi-year partnership at the Clinton Global Initiative to engage children and families at the laundromat, a place where families with young children are a core customer base. and the median household income of the typical customer is $25,000 a year. What started as a commitment to distribute posters and early literacy materials through laundromats nationwide has now grown exponentially. There are free laundry and literacy days in cities across America where families in low-income communities are invited to do their laundry for free while volunteers read and distribute books and engage in early literacy activities with their children. Over the last few years, Too Small to Fail and the Laundry Cares Foundation have been transforming the physical space of laundromats into engaging early learning environments, complete with a comfortable couch, books, blocks, and other educational materials to help families turn laundry time into meaningful opportunities to engage with their children. These family read, play, and learn spaces have been installed in more than 120 laundromats across the country, with more on the way. And independent evaluations show a significant increase in child-related literacy activities because of these spaces. I've had the chance to visit a couple of them. I stopped in at Ralph and Rosalie Macchio's Laundrolux on Long Island. And Hillary, Chelsea, and I spent some great time at Jane and Scott Wolf's Wash World in New Orleans. It's just wonderful to see how these laundromats have transformed their stores into engaging, literacy-rich spaces. And it's so much fun to watch the children and families in action, talking and reading, working together. The work hasn't stopped there. This proven model that Too Small to Fail and the Laundry Cares Foundation has created has spurred innovations in other spaces where children and families spend time. Spaces now popping up in family courts, WIC clinics, and social service agency waiting rooms. If you think about where children and families spend their time, the opportunities to meet them where they are almost limitless. The bus stop, the convenience store, the park, the playground. We all need to work toward creating a mindset among parents, businesses, and other groups that learning can happen anywhere. And key to all of this is grounding the work and the design of any space in the voices of the parents and families we're to serve. What matters to them? What do they envision for their neighborhoods? What are the improvements parents would like to see? We hope that as we engage in this work, we can begin by asking these questions and working with parents, educators, and others in communities across the country to co-design visions for better neighborhoods together. That's where you come in. I'm inspired by the diverse range of people in this virtual room today. We've leaders from nonprofits, schools, libraries, government, trade associations, businesses, and foundations. And whether you're an educator or a laundromat owner, whether you represent a community-based organization or a large corporation, you all have a role to play in improving opportunities for children's early learning. I'm so grateful to all of you here today. I look forward to working together to create brighter futures for every child and every family across our nation. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the summit. I'm Patty Miller, CEO of Too Small to Fail. So excited to be here today and just want to thank you all for joining us. We just heard some powerful words from President Clinton about why we're all gathered here today. And while we're meeting virtually, our hope is that today very much feels like a gathering to listen, to learn, to share, to ask questions, and to feel inspired. I've been so proud of the work of Too Small to Fail over the years and how we've been working to support young children's early brain and language development. Our three core strategies of meeting families where they are include supportive people, places, and resources. The people we work with are trusted messengers. The early educator, the pediatrician who talks with parents about the importance of early brain development. The places are the everyday spaces that parents frequent in their neighborhoods. And the resources are high quality tools like children's books. And we do all of our work through a racial equity lens, mindful of the disproportionate impacts of systemic racism, and most recently, that the pandemic has placed on families in our country, particularly in communities of color. So today we're here to talk about the neighborhoods that families live in today, the disparities that exist, and how we can all work together to create more equitable, learning-rich environments. As President Clinton says, our partnership with the Laundry Cares Foundation is just a great example of a unique and unlikely partnership to reach families in a space that they frequent. Our wonderful friend and partner, Brian Wallace, CEO of the Coin Laundry Association, is going to share more about this momentarily. But this has just really turned out to be a great model of innovation within a business sector that touches the lives of families regularly. Brian, along with Jane Park, our director of Too Small to Fail, started working on this partnership 6 years ago already. And it truly has been like lightning in a bottle. We've learned what it takes to engage unlikely allies to support families where they are. And we're eager to talk about these learnings, the successes, and what it's going to take to scale this work going forward. And not just to scale in laundromats, but to scale in other spaces that families are frequenting. Next slide, please. Before I talk a little bit about the summit agenda, I just would like to echo President Clinton and add my thanks to our wonderful supporters and sponsors who've made this event possible. We are just very grateful for your support and your partnership. Next slide, please. So today begins a 3-part summit with 2 hours of programming each day, today, Thursday, and again next Tuesday. Through it all, we want to center what we do in the voices of parents and caregivers, focusing on co-designing with them rather than for them. We're intentionally starting the summit with the voices of parents and their lived experiences, their daily lives, both their challenges and their resilience, and how they view the everyday spaces they interact with regularly in their communities. We're then going to hear from a panel of research experts who are going to speak to the real disparities in our neighborhoods, the impact of them, and how we can use data to unleash the power of communities and help them build their capacity. This will be followed by a conversation with leaders from multiple spaces, talking about their efforts to transform everyday spaces into language-rich environments. And then we're going to pick up again on Thursday with a conversation I'm really excited about with the head of Walt Disney Imagineering, one of the world's most iconic and beloved brands, which really puts the family at the center of all they do. After that, we'll have an action-oriented conversation with leading researchers, architects, and brands like Lego about the ingredients of family-friendly, literacy-rich spaces. And on day 3, we're going to hear from national business and association leaders about how their members are meeting the needs of families with young children. We'll also hear from laundromat leaders about what it will take to scale in more laundromats, impacting even more families. And we'll hear some exciting commitments to action, and you'll have a chance to take all that we're learning, the importance of listening to families and co-designing with them, and learn about empathy-based human-centered design techniques to begin reimagining your own neighborhood spaces. You know, over the course of the next several days, there may be summits that leave you wanting more. We're planning to have several follow-up sessions on several of these key topics, so please stay tuned for more programming to come. And now we're excited to roll up our sleeves and reimagine with all of you to create the kind of spaces that can help young children and families thrive. And we hope that whoever you are and whatever perspective or sector that you represent, you see a role for yourself in this work. Let's dream big together. And with that, I will turn it over to the amazing Brian Wallace, CEO of the Coin Laundry Association.
Well, thanks so much, Patty. It's delightful to be with you yet again. It's such a wonderful, warm welcome for everybody and a terrific overview of what we hope to get accomplished over these next 3 sessions. In a lot of ways, it's hard to believe that this is our 4th summit working together. This started 4 years ago with 30 of us in a room in Chicago, really just trying to answer the question, is this a crazy idea, or is this something we could actually bring to life? Bringing early childhood development books and literacy support through the Corner Laundromat. And look where we are today with a 4th summit, and really focused on broadening that movement now to all kinds of everyday spaces beyond the laundromat. So it's really been a terrific and incredible journey to this point. From the very start, our Laundry Cares Foundation has leapt at the chance to elevate the purpose of the Corner Laundromat. Our work together as the Laundry Literacy Coalition has been transformative for our industry and has given example and inspiration to other industries to follow suit and look for ways that they can make these connections in the neighborhood. And like all corporate social responsibility initiatives, the best are good for business and the right thing to do. And we really have embraced this opportunity to do well by doing good. And it's really been amazing for our industry. And I can't wait to see how this year's summit broadens that work even further to find more literacy-rich environments and more everyday spaces. For all of you tuning in, and I love seeing you check in here in the chat from all over the world, we're really going to need your time, your talent, and your inspiration to take this movement forward and all across the neighborhood as we go forward. And as Patty said, now more than ever, this work is essential to learning loss recovery and driving equity in the neighborhoods that our industry serves. And so that's really our guiding light as we get here today. So how about just a few notes to help you enjoy the summit even more? A couple of notes here. Please stay engaged with us in the chat, as so many of you are already. Post your comments and questions. Please download the app for the summit. It's called Spaces Summit, and you can find it in your app store. There you'll find the agenda, the video recordings, an opportunity to connect with other participants, access any of the research or other resources referenced by our speakers. You can share your notes and thoughts and comments on the wall, and really take full advantage of the summit experience. Please sign up for our summit giveaway for a chance to win a prize. It's always more fun if there's a chance to win a prize. Prizes will include a family replay learn kit, early math decals, a signed book bundle, and lots of other fun stuff to reward your participation. And even for some of you that love a little spirit of competition, you can play the event game within the app. And by entering the first code, which is reimagine, so you can get started on your way to a victory there. Also, please share your quotes, reflections, and photos on social media by using the hashtag ReimagineTogether2021. So Patty, that's enough housekeeping. I think it's about time to get this thing rolling. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Brian. So earlier, President Clinton talked about the importance of anchoring our summit and all of our work in the voices of parents and caregivers. And on that note, I am truly honored to introduce Miriam Calderon, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Early Learning at the U.S. Department of Education, along with 3 wonderful parents and caregivers who will share their lived experience and their hopes and wishes for their neighborhoods. Welcome, Miriam.
Thank you, Patty. I am so honored to be included in this conversation, and I just want to acknowledge the tremendous work and impact of you and your team at Too Small to Fail on the field of early childhood. I am so excited to welcome our audience to this session, Why We're Here, a conversation with parents and caregiver voices. The title really truly says it all. I don't think there could be a more important moment to listen to the voices of families and caregivers. We know the pandemic has caused unprecedented levels of stress on families with young children. Families are weighing very difficult decisions about their child's health and safety, continuing to guide their learning and development in many instances without the usual supports and support systems. To be able to work with them, and those we know are leading to really challenging circumstances and more stress on families, and therefore more stress on children. And in some instances, this has been described by some researchers who have been documenting families' voices throughout these past 18 months as sort of a chain reaction of stress on families, in particular with young children. At the same time, we know that there is a bold agenda of this administration that I'm honored to be a part of, the Build Back Better agenda, where the president is putting out a bold vision about what it for American families, including what it would mean for families with young children to have a lot more supports, both to be resilient during this crisis as we see through this, but also putting out a vision of what a new future could look like to be able to be a parent of a young children, to be a young child growing up in our country. So supports like paid family leave, affordable, accessible access to early care and education opportunities, a new child tax credit that was implemented early this year are all parts of what we know is the support system that we need to be able to wrap around families to help them thrive, because when they thrive, children thrive. An incredibly important part of this, and part of what we want to hear from an incredible group of parent leaders today, is the neighborhoods and the context where families live. And we've known for such a long time, and have documented this through reams of research, the impact that neighborhoods have on families' well-being, on young children's learning and development. And what I think is incredibly provocative about the conversation that we're going to have today in this session is how you can actually think about those neighborhoods and those places where families are and where young children are as being part of the, transformed into supports for families and conducive environments for young children's learning and development. Again, the science has been very clear for a long time. Children are born learning. They're learning in all of their interactions, none more important than the interactions that they're having with their families and their primary caregivers. And so how do we create every one of those spaces really, truly a place that can support families and young children in that healthy development. So I'm super excited to be able to introduce 3 parent leaders in their own families and leaders in their communities who have been doing this work and have ideas about how we can create these kinds of spaces, how I think policy can be shaped at the federal level down to the community level to be able to support truly an approach where we take what we know about young children's learning and development and the science, and we put that into practice, including spaces for young children. So I'm super excited. I'm going to hand it over because I really want the experts here giving us their thoughts. So we have, again, 3 incredible leaders, Athenia, Veronica, and Deborah. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, introduce their families to us, and why don't we start with Athenia and have you kick us off?
Sure. Hello, everyone. So my name is Athenia Rodney, and I'm CEO and founder of Emoji Events, and I am also organizer of the Juneteenth Family Day here in New York City. This is my lovely family, my husband, my 3 children. The oldest on the top, he is Mason. He is 12 in 8th grade. And then I have Marcus, who is in 2nd grade, who's 7, and then my little Madison, who just started kindergarten, is very excited to be at the same school with her brothers. So this is a little bit about who my family is. We live in Brooklyn, New York, and we have lived here. I have lived here almost all my life until I went to college. I went to school at Middlebury College in Vermont. And I'm an educator, so everything that I do is kind of focused around and has been centered around educating my family, educating my friends, and educating in all of the spaces that I'm around. And I'll pass it back to you, Miriam.
Thank you so much, Athenia. What a beautiful picture and beautiful family. Veronica, welcome.
Hello, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I feel so just lucky to be here, blessed to be here. And my name is Veronica. I'm an early childhood educator. I've been in the field of early childhood education for 14 plus years now, mainly in teaching Montessori preschools for 0 to 5. I do have 2 children of my own in that age range. My son here in this picture is August Rain. He just recently turned 2 years old. And my daughter, Abigail Rose, she is 4 and she'll be 5 in December. My husband, Jonathan, he's a veterinary technician, which as a child, that was my dream job. And now that I'm a grown-up, I'm very glad I did not take that path. I fell into early childhood education kind of by accident, just trying to be more like my big sister, who was a preschool teacher, and I really fell in love with it. I never knew how incredible it could feel to help shape young minds. And seeing them grow up over the years and seeing, what those early years, the things that we help to teach them, how it just grows and grows and grows over the years is incredible. And I'm just loving it. So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being here.
Thank you, Veronica. Beautiful picture. And thank you for your service in the field and working to educate young children. Deborah, hello.
Hi, that's my granddaughter, Reagan. She's 7 years old. And my name is Deborah Golden, and I live in Detroit, Michigan. I've lived there all my life. I'm a mother of 2 adult daughters and my 1 beautiful granddaughter. I'm a parent on the Great Start Parent Coalition of Wayne, and I love the work that we're doing all around Wayne County, spreading the word on how important it is to start at birth. Talking is teaching. Thank you. And I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Deborah. I love that picture. Your granddaughter looks like she's got some spunk in her. I love it. Great. Well, we're going to dive right in. I would love it if you could now tell us about your neighborhoods. Where do you enjoy spending time? What is it about those spaces that you appreciate and enjoy the most? And why don't we start with Veronica?
So I am from Los Angeles, born and raised, and my favorite place, honestly, to go with my children since the pandemic has been Target. It seems strange. Like I was trying to think, like what are some of our day-to-day places that we just love to go? And honestly, when I ask my kids, Target is where they want to go. I think the main reason is just because you can get everything done in one shop, but also I make a game of it when we're there. We go down different aisles and we point out, fun things that we see, shapes and colors and letters. And I feel like when we're there, I'm in a community of other moms. I feel like when my children start crying or giving me a hard time, I see another mom down the aisle that's dealing with the same thing. And it's a strange sense of community that we have there. And it's a stark difference from some of the other stores that we have to shop at. So it's funny, but it's one of our favorite places. I'll wake up in the morning and I'll tell my daughter, okay, you don't have school today. We're going to go somewhere super fun and super special. And she's like, we're going shopping at Target. And so that's one of our favorite, fun places to go to get errands done. I'll go there for my groceries. I'll go there for clothes, for, things around the house, just because it's a one-stop shop. And I feel like it's easier than a lot of the stores that I'm used to going to. Sometimes supermarkets and things like that in my neighborhood just aren't geared towards children. And that's honestly one place I go where I feel like it's okay to be a mom, and it's okay that my kids are there and they're, being kids, they're being little. Other than that, we have a dinosaur car wash, which is our favorite place to visit, just to take the kids out for some fun and get a car wash while we're learning and having a good time. So those are some of our favorite places in our neighborhood.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that, Veronica. Okay, Target, you're on notice there. Deborah, how about you?
I love my neighborhood. I've lived in it 40 plus years, and all the neighbors are like family. I enjoy that I can sit on my porch and have great conversations with people, next door neighbors or neighbors walking down the street. And I enjoy walking around the neighborhood. We have a couple parks. We go to the library, and I always find such joy because I feel so safe because I've been there so long. And that's mostly what I do around my neighborhood.
Wonderful. Thank you, Deborah. Athenia?
Sure. So I really want to learn some more, Veronica, about this dinosaur car wash, because that is not something that we have here in New York. So I definitely want to, we'll talk offline. But
Yes.
So places for myself. So I enjoy taking the kids. I mean, honestly, just really to the park. I mean, after being in COVID for 16 plus months, the kids just want to get outside. They want to be able to have some physical activity. And so we have taken some time to really just go around to different parks. Some parks they really like, some parks I really like, depending on how much, how many people are out. Because of COVID, I feel like we have to be so particular about, who is around us and what's around us. Unfortunately, are people in that space, taking in things the same way? Are they all wearing masks? Are they, encouraging their children to wear masks and those kind of things? So I would definitely say the park is like my number one. And then if I would say a number two, I would say, similar is the supermarket. My children definitely enjoy. We actually just got a Target, but it's a small Target, so it's not fun. So we go to our big supermarket, and the kids just love to try new foods that are there. And one of the things that the supermarket does over here is they allow us to do taste testing. So they'll have like different cheeses or different fruits that they'll cut up and put combinations and stuff together. So that's, I think, what, I'm a foodie person. I'm trying to get my children to be there too, but, slowly but surely we're working on it.
Great. Thank you so much, Athenia. Deborah, I think I would love it if you could tell us now about what are the spaces in your neighborhood where you really feel like they are not particularly comfortable when spending time with your granddaughter. So, what about? Tell us a little bit about maybe some of those spaces as well.
Yes, we have. Yeah, it's a few parks around that, like young people have kind of taken over. You can maybe go in early in the morning, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. You can go to the park and have a good time, about 1 or 2. I don't feel safe there, because they playing loud music and inappropriate music for children. And they do a lot of, it's a strip, not right within my neighborhood itself, a couple blocks over. They have a strip where, I don't know if they race cars or what, but boy, it's a lot of noise and a lot of people standing around racing cars. And we would never go there, around that time. But it's more so the parks. Everywhere else, I feel pretty safe, other than a few of the parks where the young people have taken over the parks with loud music that's inappropriate for children and things like that. But other than that, I would say a couple of the parks.
Great. Thanks for that, Deborah. How about you, Veronica? Places where you've noticed that you feel like it's not particularly conducive to parenting with a young child and places you frequent?
Yeah, unfortunately, this is a really easy question for me to answer because I feel like daily I experience being in places where I'm like, okay, this is not, we got to go home. I'll try this on the weekend when I have help because it's not going to work out. And so unfortunately, a lot of my errands need to be pushed off. A lot of important things need to be pushed off. So one of those actually happened to me yesterday at T-Mobile. My husband's phone broke, and it was a must that I got him a new phone. So I went and I took my son, who's 2 years old, and the store is just not inviting for a parent. When I was younger, we grew up thinking, I feel like it's the parent's job to control your child in the store. Make sure they stand here, they don't touch anything. That is your job as a parent. And I kind of grew up thinking that that was the right way.
Yeah.
Being in the field of early childhood education, I realized that that's kind of not the right way we should be thinking. We need to be thinking of how we can make these places better for parents so that they can still get these things done. Mom or not, I have things I need to do, and I have my children with me, period. Like, they're a part of me. So being there yesterday, the chairs are very tall. My son had nowhere to sit, nowhere to even stand comfortably. He was kind of just looking around, and nobody was there to help me. So they had me do like a wait list where somebody was going to come out. I was there for over an hour, and there was just nowhere for us to be comfortable. Nothing for him to look at, nothing to keep us busy. We ended up leaving, and I cried in the car because it was a very difficult experience, and we couldn't even get the phone. The same, almost exact same thing happened to me in January when I needed to get my laptop fixed at Best Buy. That time I had both of my kids with me. The same, I don't know if they all have the same tall tech chairs, but they're the tall plastic bar stool chairs. And so both of my kids were sitting under the table, under the counter, waiting at Best Buy for 2 hours. Just kind of playing with a little dinosaur I had in my purse and my phone and trying to keep them busy. And it just felt like people were looking at me like I shouldn't be there, like I didn't belong. Like, why is this lady here with her kids? This isn't a kid's store. We have expensive things here. They shouldn't be touching, which I understand, but I'm a person. I have needs, and I'm a mom, and I need to have my kids with me sometimes to get those needs met. So that's what's really difficult. Those places where I need to get things done and I need to take my kids and we don't feel welcome, and it makes the process more difficult.
Thank you for sharing that, Veronica. Athenia, your thoughts, things to add?
Yeah, definitely. So similarly, in line with what Veronica just shared, I would say, and some people might say that's a little weird, but I would say my first is the school. It's definitely not a place that I feel, particularly comfortable. I had to take my children out of my school community, and we travel an hour to school every morning just because it's not safe. I don't feel, growing up for me, I used to go to school in the morning, and then I used to have to run home in the afternoon because I was a smart person and I'm very bold, and I was always raising my hand. I always knew the answer. The teacher asked a question, I would be raising my hand, and the other kids in the class just thought that I was trying to be better than them, or that, or you're a smarty tootie or something like that. And it's like, no, I enjoy learning. I enjoy education, and I don't see anything wrong with that. And so when I had children, I wanted to make sure that I was in an environment where my children did not have to feel for that they were in an environment where it was a norm to be smart, where, that became a part of the regular day to day, and they felt safe. They don't feel like they have to run home. They don't feel like they're going to get jumped after school. That is, a space where they can grow and they can mentally learn without any inhibition. So when you ask that question, I'm sorry, I get a little emotional about it because part of the reason why I got so much into education was for that reason. It wasn't a space that I felt like I can grow. And then I went away to college, and I was considered the top of my class. I was a valedictorian when I graduated high school, and the same for middle school. And when I got to college, I was at the bottom of the totem pole. They were like, I had to take remedial classes. I had, there were so many different challenges. And so, it left me thinking, what kind of a system was I a part of that would I guess blow me up in my head that I was the smart and intelligent person, and I was, but when it compared to others and other communities, I wasn't. So that would be my biggest concern about community.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Athenia. You've all put really important issues on the table. And so the next thing I want to ask you, and this is really important for policymakers and leaders and people that are deciding resources and working in systems. I want us all to listen, myself included, taking notes on this response. What would you've put these really important issues on the table around safety, around what it would take? Just a little goes a long way, right? In being able to make these spaces conducive for families with young children. Please tell us, if you had a magic wand, right, and you could improve the environments that your children are growing up in, what would you change? You're the magic wand leader for the day, mayor, city, resident, insert whatever you want. Why don't we start with Veronica?
Yeah, I love this. So if I had a magic wand and I could wave it over my community, I would make it a welcoming environment for parents, families, and children where it's clearly it's clear that this place was thought out with you in mind as a parent and as a child, because in Montessori, we call it the prepared environment. We prepare our classroom in a way that it's welcoming and inviting to the children, and it leads to natural learning experiences in their environment. So in Montessori, the teacher is there just to guide them, to prepare the place for them to learn. We're not giving them all of the information and teaching them. It's the environment that's truly teaching, and that's what is believed in the Montessori philosophy. And so just taking that and applying it to our whole neighborhood, I couldn't imagine how wonderful it would be to walk out my door and every store I go into, every shopping center I go into, every restaurant is a prepared environment for parents and children. You can clearly see that the person who owns it or runs it thought about the people that are coming in and are giving them these natural learning experiences, because that's truly how children learn. So I would love it if my kids can see that everywhere.
Thank you, Veronica. Deborah.
Okay. Excuse me. I would wave my magic wand to make the world a better place. And then all other things will kind of fall into place. First, I'll have better housing in the neighborhoods, better health care for people, safer neighborhoods, period. Safe play areas for children, more parks, better markets in the neighborhood, and the most important one, better schools across the board, no matter what neighborhood you lived in, what community you lived in, or what zip code you lived in.
Thank you, Deborah. That seems doable, right?
Yes.
Athenia?
One would think, right? So in thinking about this question, what came to mind to me was a TV show that I had watched a while ago, and it was about a doctor who had gotten offered a job to come to New York, and she was in somewhere in the Midwest. And she was deciding back and forth if she wanted to take the job. And I guess she went to visit, and she asked the teachers or the schools that she was going to bring her children to. She was like, why are the playgrounds on the roof? And they told her, because we live in a concrete jungle, and that's the only place that we could create a space for our kids to play. And that was an eye-opener for me, because I thought to myself, if you look at what that looks like in retrospect, it may be outdoors, but it is encased in bars. There are bars all around the space. And then when you look at all of the school buildings, they also are encased in bars. So it looks like a prison. It doesn't look inviting. It doesn't look welcoming. Like I said, I'm very big on education. I'm in the school buildings all the time. I have all of the jobs that I've ever had have been dealing with either educational support programs for kids who are struggling in school, to dealing with at-risk youth for them dropping out of high school, until now, where I am able to create events in the community to bring awareness to educational deficits that are happening. So if I had a magic wand, my magic wand would definitely be to have open spaces that are beautiful, inviting, non-barred, and to make a space where the teachers are protecting the children that they are, that they're working with, and where it is okay to be smart in class and in spaces where other children and adults are.
Thank you so much, Athenia. We are unfortunately almost out of time. So I'm going to ask one final question, and that is, what gives you hope? If you could just share one thing, you're all leaders, as you've talked about, one thing that gives you hope that you're working on right now. And why don't we start with you, Deborah?
Okay, I have hope because of all the great organizations that's out here now, the program, all the resources that's available, to the families and the communities. Like, I'm connected to the Great Start Wayne, and we are passing out great information on how important it is to start talking is teaching at birth, and as well as all types of resources that can help the communities in all areas.
Thanks, Deborah. Veronica?
I think just really quickly, Athenia, what you have said really resonates with me. And I feel like our childhood growing up in schools and our early education, it sounds very similar. So when I first stepped into a Montessori classroom and I saw what early childhood education could be compared to what it was when I was a child, I was amazed and I felt hopeful. And that's also what I feel now. I feel very hopeful because I see the work that Too Small to Fail is doing in connection with all these amazing organizations, especially what is being done with the laundromats and seeing the transformation. Again, seeing the laundromat that I spent all my time with, my mom as a child, versus the incredible things that are being done at these laundromats today. That is hope for me. Seeing, my childhood is so much different from what my children's is and what future generations will have because of the work that's being done. And so that is incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Athenia?
Sure. Well, I have partnered with an organization called United for Brownsville. My, first engagement with Too Small to Fail was with them. Since we have put different programs in the supermarket, so similar to what Veronica shared, where we're trying to make spaces that are more inviting to families and to parents who have to bring their children with them on errands that they're making. So we have signs in the supermarkets for the kids to engage, to find colorful items in the supermarket, to to kind of make a game out of it. That's educational, that's something that's thriving, something where a parent is not having to just say, here, take my phone so that you can be quiet for a moment, but really having something to engage a child. We also have created a book donation space in front of the building, so people in the community are just dropping books off and others are taking books. So books are just not being thrown out, but are really being recycled and used in ways that are actually helpful to the community. And then lastly, during COVID, we created kind of a spinoff off of our learning landscapes in the market and created learning landscapes at home, because a lot of parents were frustrated at the fact that they weren't spending much time with their children. Their children are spending a lot of time on tablets, and that's all we could do. And so we created cards that allowed families to engage with their kids at different ages, from the 0 to 3, and those that were a little older, to do things, to change the simple red light, green lights to something that that is educational. To do a chore in the house, such as matching socks, and to make that educational. So that's the thing that I would say that we have been working with, and looking forward to expanding that to different neighborhoods and communities.
Thank you so much, Athenia. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up this conversation, but I can't thank you enough for your sharing your wisdom, your ideas, your leadership, your vulnerability, and speaking honestly about what you see. There's so much that we can take from this, and it is so critically important. As I said to kick off this conversation, we are having a huge opportunity at the policy level where we haven't seen in decades in terms of more support and attention to early childhood. And your voices, the voices of families at that level down to the community level and the work that you're doing is just so critical in your leadership. So thank you again for kicking off the rest of this incredible agenda. What we're going to do now is transition to a video where we'll be able to hear from more families and more parents about their hopes and the intention that we need to bring into our work in communities and in policy to support early childhood development in young children and families. And then we're going to have a panel following the video moderated by an incredible leader in the field and good friend of mine, Dr. Jacqueline Jones. Athenia, Deborah, Veronica, thanks again. It was wonderful to meet you all. Take care.
Thank you, Miriam. It was a pleasure.
My name is Dolores Connors, and I teach reading in Teaneck, New Jersey.
My name is Dustin Willis. I live in Los Angeles, California, and I just have the one son, Dorian, who is 4 as of last month.
My name is Natrina Roper. I live just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. I have a daughter who is 18 months old.
My name is Liliana. I live in the area of South Denver. I have one kid, and he is 3.5 years old, and he has a hearing impairment.
My name is Jessica. I have 2 children, a 5-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son who was born with a condition called spina bifida and hydrocephalus.
My name is Lisa Park. I live in Orange County, California, in Southern California. I have 2 kids. I have a 1 neurodiverse son who is going to be 13 soon. And then I also have a typical daughter, typical on the spectrum, and she is going to be 8 soon.
So as far as talking, singing, reading, we do all of the above. Like Dorian has the biggest book collection.
She loves books. She literally will pick up a book and shove it into my face in order for me to read it to her.
On Fridays, we have a book talk, and it is really wonderful to hear people share their books.
My wife is a former dancer, so he and her are constantly dancing all the time. We're singing the songs.
I typically take my daughter to the park. It's a chance for her to get outside of the home and run, to see other children, and just let loose without me having to clean up behind her.
The public parks allow us to all come together and enjoy recreation, enjoy nature, smiles, and just be together in this space that help us just to stay connected.
We live extremely close to one of the Inclusion Matters by Shane's Inspiration playgrounds. Like, we can walk there. So that's been a blessing until, COVID hit, just because it's so welcoming and inviting, and it's just a place our family can feel like home.
My son really loves that the Denver Public Library is over there. Like I said, he has a hearing impairment, and there were 2 women that knew ASL. So I think it's fantastic that my son was able to help other kids with that reading time because they read some of it in ASL for him.
As soon as we go to any new location, a lot of the caregivers and the parents kind of scout the area to make sure, is there certain parts that may be endangerment to a neurodiverse child that a lot of the typical child carrying parents may not have to identify.
He's not in a wheelchair just yet, but he's also non-ambulatory, so he needs to be in a stroller. Trying to get that stroller through the sand in a playground is nearly impossible. So being thoughtful about designing some of these playgrounds, like how can I design this piece of equipment so that the most amount of people can get use out of it, like not just your standard 4-year-old, but a 4-year-old like Dorian, like what would this need for him to be able to enjoy it?
Just advocate for what your child needs. You are not a hassle by having a child that needs access to all of the other things that the children and the community are doing. You are not a hassle for asking for the bare minimum.
So if I could redesign any space in the community, it would definitely be to add more Linden libraries. I think that they're important. So every public park, near the water fountain or near the basketball courts, there would be a space that you could take a book, leave a book, share a book.
So I think if there's one thing that I could tell my local community, even elsewhere, is just being really, be kind, right? Being mindful of others around you. Not everybody has same capabilities and ability. Try to understand where that other person comes from, why it's difficult for that person. It may not be a physical space, but I think it's more of a mental mindfulness and kindness that I would probably want to inquire from my community.
We're all a lot more alike than we are different, and if we're just open to having conversations and being friendly and kind and wanting that, I think it makes the world a difference.
That is just comforting to me, that there's so many people in our neighborhood, in our community, that are still willing to be happy and friendly, and just a simple hi and a wave makes her feel good, which in turn makes me feel good.
Thank you, Miriam, and welcome to all of you joining this session entitled, Why Now? Promoting Neighborhood Equity. I'm Jacqueline Jones, the President and CEO of the Foundation for Child Development. I want to extend my thanks to Patty Miller and the Too Small to Fail staff for inviting me to participate in today's summit. I'm honored to moderate this session with two esteemed panelists. Emma Dorn is Senior Knowledge Expert at McKinsey & Company. You can wave again, Emma, let them see you. And Renee Boynton-Jarrett is Founding Director at Vital Village Networks and Associate Professor of Pediatrics at Boston University. Please see your conference app for more detailed bios. That app will be very helpful during the summit. We've heard some powerful perspectives from parents about safe and not safe areas of their communities, as well as their hopes for the future. Children grow, develop, and learn in the context of their families and their communities, which includes schools, parks, and yes, Target. DiversityDataKids.org tells us that children who live in neighborhoods with high quality early care and education, sound schools, safe housing, access to healthy food, with parks and playgrounds and clean air, are more likely to grow into healthy, productive adults than children who are denied these experiences. The past 18 months have been challenging. Young children and their families have been stressed in unprecedented ways. But the pandemic has forced us to take a hard look at the impact of structural racism on communities of color and to acknowledge the decades of systemic disenfranchisement and disinvestment that have kept generations in poverty and resulted in inequitable neighborhood conditions. And still we see individuals, families, community organizations bringing all of their assets to achieve a better life for their children. As we raise concerns about the loss of formal school time, we should also remember that children are always learning and that this is an opportunity to support communities themselves to offer high quality engagements that can enrich children's lives and enhance the school experience. Emma, will you begin by providing us with some research context for this conversation?
Sure, I'd be delighted to. Thank you. So the research that we do focuses mostly on school-age students, but the reality is that what's happening in the schools is very much shaped, as everyone has been saying, by early childhood experiences as well. And as the pandemic hit, we were immediately concerned about not just the health and the economic impact, which were big, but also the educational impact. And we were especially concerned that that could be exacerbating some of the underlying opportunity gaps that we see in our schools. So we partnered with Curriculum Associates, which is a provider of formative assessments in schools. They run assessments in schools in the fall, the winter, and the spring, just to try and get an understanding of what was happening in US schools, what was the impact of the pandemic, and was it inequitable? And what we found was that actually the pandemic had a really quite a large impact, and furthermore, it was inequitable, and those inequities are really concerning. So maybe if we drop to the next page, we can take a look at what that looked like. So we basically took a look at assessments that were done in the spring of this year and compared them to assessments that were done in the springs of previous years prior to the pandemic. And what we found is that students were about 5 months behind in math and about 4 months behind in reading, where students typically would have been if the pandemic hadn't hit. And that's a really significant number. If you think of a 10-month school year, 5 months means half a school year. So students are about half a year behind. And not only is the unfinished learning that students are suffering from real, and significant, it's also quite inequitable. And we looked at that by race, by income, and by location. We couldn't identify that at the student level, both for student privacy reasons and because a kindergartner doesn't know what their family income is. So we looked at it at the school level. And so what you see here is probably an underestimation of some of those gaps. Because obviously at the student level, there may be greater variation than at the school level. But even at the school level, we can see that, for example, in math, low-income students were 7 months behind where they would have been normally, whereas white students were, high-income students were only about 4 months behind. And then similarly in race, for example, if we look at students that were in majority Black schools were about 6 months behind where they usually would have been, whereas in reading, students that were in majority white schools were only about 3 months behind. And this is really a reflection of some of the underlying opportunity gaps that existed throughout the pandemic. If you look at the access to internet and devices, the gaps closed over the summer, but they're still meaningful. And then the gap that really shocked me and hit me to the core was the access to live instruction. We looked at the access to the number of students who had access to any live instruction in the last week. And Black and Hispanic students were twice as likely to have no access at all to live instruction over the last week during the pandemic. And that really hit home, because without live instruction, how can you learn? Now, what's also important to understand is that these gaps build upon historical gaps in our systems based, as you've been talking about, these decades of history of inequities. And so if we go to the next page, we can kind of see how the gaps caused by COVID are building upon historical gaps. So this, just 1 minute. This slide is a little hard to read, so let me explain it to you. The black line here is the overall historical average growth that happens over a school year. So between about September and May, students learn. Over the summer, students forget a little bit of what they've learned. That's called the summer learning slide, and then they learn again. The black line was students in majority Black schools historically. And you can see that already there were opportunity gaps, and that those students weren't able to access the same level of learning as the average student. The blue line is what happened in the pandemic. You can see that as the pandemic initially hit, students really flatlined, especially students in majority Black schools weren't learning anything at all. Over the summer, we're assuming that the similar summer slide would happen as usual. The good news is that in this last school year, students began to learn again, but just not at the pace that they were learning historically. And at the end there, you can see that 6 months of total loss and how that stacks on top of historical losses. The final thing I would say, as we're thinking about how do we deal with all of this, is that we really have to remember this is not just an academic problem. The impact of the pandemic on students has been multifaceted. And we actually ran a survey of 16,000 parents across all 50 states to understand that. And what we found was really quite sobering. 35% of parents said that they were very or extremely worried about their child's mental health. Very or extremely worried, that's over a third of parents, and 80% of parents had some level of concern. And if you flip to the next slide, you can see that this was underlain by some real changes in student behavior that parents were observing. And so parents were observing significant increases, 5 to 6 percentage points increases, in observing that their student was suffering from medical conditions such as anxiety and depression. And that furthermore, there were even larger increases in the number of parents observing that their students are exhibiting worrying behaviors such as social withdrawal, self-isolation or lethargy or irrational fears. And I'm a parent myself, and I have 3 kids. I have a 14-year-old, an 11-year-old, and an 8-year-old. And I could really see that impact as the pandemic hit. The other final point is that the academics and the broader social, emotional, and mental health of students is intricately intertwined. And we found that parents who were observing that their students had fallen further behind academically also were more likely to have students who are struggling with mental health as well. And so as we try to support students coming out of this and support communities, having that holistic approach is going to be particularly important. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emma. This research is really critical for us to get an understanding of what's been happening over the past 18 months. Now, Renee, you've been looking closely at data and partnering with families and caregivers, trying to have an impact on child, family, and community well-being. Would you please share with us some of the work you've been doing at the Vital Village Networks?
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to speak with you all today about neighborhood opportunity and its real impact on child equity. I know I don't need to share with those of us in the room that child's health and well-being is strongly influenced by their families, but also by the communities that they grow within. We say it takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a village to fail to protect and invest in a child's full potential. And we know structural inequities are the root of so many adversities that harm the developing brains and bodies of kids. So if we want to transform outcomes, we have to transform our systems. And as Dr. Jones mentioned earlier, the Child Opportunity Index is a wonderful tool developed by the diversitydatakids.org group at Brandeis and Dr. Dolores Acevedo Garcia that allows communities and policymakers to see where inequities exist and take steps to reduce those disparities. It helps us understand the quality of neighborhoods. And it combines a number of factors. So quality childcare, schools, proximity to healthy food, parks and recreation, also socioeconomic conditions, safe housing, but also air pollution, toxic waste, and excessive heat. So the beauty of it is it's not just a single factor, but it incorporates multiple factors from health, education, and socioeconomic conditions. And so if we go to the next slide, we can see that unfortunately, as we look across the United States, if you look over on the left-hand side of your slide, you can see that across levels of opportunity, when we look at very low neighborhood opportunity to very high, we see that in the blue and orange columns, Black and Latinx children are more likely to exist and reside in neighborhoods that have very low or low opportunities. And when you look on the right-hand side of the slide, this is across the 100 largest metropolitan areas in the United States, we see that when we're looking just at poor children in the United States who reside in households that are below the poverty line, we see that there is even a higher percentage. You're more likely, if you're Black or Latin, to live in a very low neighborhood opportunity level community if your household is experiencing poverty. So we see even sharpening and widening of this effect among children who are residing in poverty. And so this is something that we can look at and understand systematically how we can take steps to work in a different direction. And if we go to the next slide, you can see it's not that we don't know how to do high quality care and provide neighborhoods that have rich opportunities for children, exceptional healthcare, preschool and education, healthy parks. It's that often we can't address the systemic factors that lead to neighborhood inequities when we're working in silos and when we're working in silos that keep us from working in a collaborative way towards meaningful policy changes. So At Vital Village Networks, we asked a basic question. What would it look like for every child to have an opportunity to thrive in a healthy community? And we really do three primary things to really work towards that healthy community that every child can thrive in and every family can prosper in. So we take a collaborative approach to building community capacity by supporting collaboration, research, data sharing, training, and advocacy. And that really starts with welcoming parents and caregivers and letting them know that they belong. They belong at the table deciding on the benchmarks for child well-being. They belong at the table deciding on the measures and strategies and designing the solutions. So we promote collective learning through these partnerships, and we use data and data dashboards to improve accountability around our progress. We convene networks for cross-sector collaboration, and all of this works towards promoting systems level change. If you can advance the slide again, I just want to share a little bit about how we think about this. So by belonging, we really are thinking about community wisdom, if you could advance again, being valued, and community experience, lived experience being valued that allows us to co-design solutions, building the capacity of leaders and creating processes for equitable decision-making leads to different types of partnerships and different types of stakeholder engagement. And that changes our mindsets and infrastructures that ultimately can lead to policy and practice shifts. If we can advance again, I just want to give an example of how this comes to light. One of the things we really work on doing is democratizing access to data and information to really help put tap into the evaluation thinking of parent leaders, but also to be able to have that information shared and observed. So if we advance again, this is an example of how we've used the Child Opportunity Index. On your left, you can see the red areas in our city of Boston have high levels of opportunity. And the blue areas are having lower areas of opportunity on this, relatively lower areas. And then if you look on the right-hand side of the slide, you look at participation rates in early child care and education. And the yellow areas that are slightly lower areas of rates of childhood education participation, and the orange areas are higher rates. So you see that neighborhood opportunity and early childhood education and care participation before the pandemic really went along the lines of the Childhood Opportunity Index. But it's not the whole story, because you see within areas that have relatively lower opportunity, there are some pockets with higher degrees of participation. And so that's one of the advantages of the index, is you can learn and find bright spots that you can learn from, places where solutions are taking hold and working. And this allows us to learn from parents and educators. Finally, if you advance to the last slide, this is looking at access to early childhood care and education during the COVID-19 pandemic, so during 2020. And on the left-hand side of the slide, you can see that again, we see the Childhood Opportunity Index and the blue areas that have lower opportunities and the orange areas with higher opportunities. Those orange areas have greater numbers of high quality childcare and early care and education, and larger centers that serve those needs. When we look on the right-hand side, we see that, again, when we see the capacity, the blue areas that have a higher capacity for early care and education are more prevalent in higher opportunity areas. But it's important to also notice that family and child care centers, so family-based care, which are the maroon areas, are more prevalent in some of the lower opportunity neighborhoods. So that it does speak to an inequity in access, but it also speaks to a community-driven and parent and caregiver-driven solution. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This is very hopeful information, and I think as we have an audience of wide range of funders and community business leaders, folks trying to work hard to make a difference. For each of you, what's your message to our audience regarding where they can invest their time, their creativity, their financial resources to create a more equitable neighborhood condition?
So I'm happy to jump in. I mean, I think that there are so many different opportunities for investment right now. We obviously have the federal government with huge investments to schools, but often some of the cross-cutting elements are actually harder for any individual school district to do. And the other thing that I'm seeing as a real constraint right now for schools especially, is they're trying to help students recover from the pandemic, both emotionally and academically, is finding the human capital to do that. There is a teacher shortage, there's a shortage of tutors, there's a shortage of counselors and social workers. And so one of the things I would think about if I was a philanthropist is, are there areas that you could partner with school districts, create the partnerships between community-based organizations and school districts to bring in different sources of expertise and to bring in adults into schools to help students. And you know, some of the approaches that have been taken, so for example, high dosage tutoring has been incredibly helpful in helping students. Students can learn 1 to 2 years of additional math, for example, over a single year with high dosage tutoring, but it's not reaching all the kids that it needs. And so how can philanthropists partner with school districts who are overwhelmed right now with school reopening, have 1,000 things on their mind, to make it easy for them to roll out some of those programs that we know are evidence-based and can succeed?
Thank you. Renee, some suggestions for our audience?
I see that partnerships are powerful. I think one of the things the pandemic exposed is that families and communities were responding with creativity, ingenuity, and innovation immediately to reduce social isolation and promote social connections and mental health and well-being. And yes, we have experienced quite a deal. Families have experienced a lot, children are going through a lot, and it is going to be a long recovery period. But the situation would be far worse had we not had those innovative responses from the communities as well. And so I think it's really important. It's a time for us to take a real look at the solutions that are grown and developed within communities that are closest to the inequities, that are closest to the daily experiences, and really seeing their solutions and scaling those solutions. So I think that's a really important opportunity. I think it's also an opportunity to listen differently. We really do need to listen to educators and early care and education providers in a different way. We are seeing some response in the workforce. We are seeing some response in levels of engagement. And I think we've got to work in partnership to make a more feasible, livable, supportive environment that also nurtures their mental health and well-being. So I think it is time for us to have, boundless amounts of compassion and boundless amounts of partnerships that are listening to new voices and voices that often have been dismissed and not seen as the leaders of the solutions.
Wonderful advice. And I've gotten the 1-minute warning. This is extraordinary that this panel has flown by. Emma and Renee, thank you so much for the work you do and the insights you've shared today. While we fight the battle to dismantle neighborhood inequalities, we must also acknowledge and affirm individual, family, and community assets and the powerful role that they play. We wanted to set the stage for this summit with research and inspiration from our panelists, and we've gotten that. But we know that 25 minutes is too short a time to really do justice to this work, its implications, and to provide opportunities to engage in it in meaningful and collaborative ways. So Too Small to Fail will host a more in-depth webinar on the state of families and neighborhoods later this year. Please stay tuned for more information. And now I could not be more delighted to introduce one of my favorite people on the planet. Ralph Smith is the founder and managing director of the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. He will lead the next panel conversation on how leaders from diverse sectors have come together to create literacy and learning-rich environments in multiple neighborhood spaces. Ralph, it's yours.
Jacqueline, I am delighted to have the opportunity to have heard this panel. I'm delighted to know that I'm one of your more favorite people. I mean, that is an elevation that I take quite seriously. You know, as this panel that you're about to hear explores the what and the how, I would be remiss were I not to thank you for reminding us that we have got to hold on to the why. And when we think about the why, we must remain especially cognizant of the context. And an important aspect of that context requires us to acknowledge the place-based challenges, the disparate opportunities, the disparate access, the wide variation in capacity of neighborhoods. But also, it requires us to acknowledge the bright spot, acknowledge the creativity. I love it, Renee, the creativity, the ingenuity, and the innovation of the folks who live in those communities who are closest to the problem and who have found a number of homegrown indigenous responses that really could be solutions. And I am grateful for that, because as we turn to this panel, they're going to have much the same challenge that you did, and that is to figure out how in just a few minutes to share a bit about the projects and initiatives about which they are passionate, to which they are committed, and around which they are doing really substantial, noteworthy, and inspirational work. Now, what I know is that this term reimagine, while overused, especially in the past 18 months, applies very much to today's discussion. It is a very real promise, because I'm willing to bet that those of us who are listening, after this panel, the next time we see or hear or visit a housing development, a playground, a grocery store, or a laundromat, we will think about it differently. That we will see not just a laundromat, not just a housing development, not just a grocery store, not just a playground. We're going to see an important community resource, a valuable asset with something quite special, and that's an opportunity to help young children to learn and to partner with their parents in that enterprise. And with that as an introduction, I want to work us through the fabulous four we have with us this afternoon. And Rachel, I'm going to start with you. You're going to be our leadoff hitter. And I want you to tell us a bit about Home Forward, a bit about the partnership with Too Small to Fail, and a bit about the work that you're leading. Rachel.
Thank you so much, Ralph. I'm getting an unstable internet connection. I'm not in my regular space, so I'm hoping for the best here. Give me the high sign if something goes wrong. It's my pleasure to be here. I work for Home Forward. We're the public housing authority serving Multnomah County, which is where Portland, Oregon sits. And we house over 10,000 households within our county. We have a large voucher population, folks living with vouchers in our communities. We have 100 apartment communities across the county. And one of the first things that I was asked to address was why housing in this conversation. At the time, kids are not spending the majority of their time leverage those communities and leverage that environment. And to embed early learning opportunities within those spaces where children and families are spending time every single day coming and going from their homes, paying their rent, playing on the playground, waiting for the bus. And another why housing argument is that a lot of affordable housing is paired with supportive services and programming. And so when you think about the built environment and the things that we can do to enrich it for early learning, those things can be further augmented, further leveraged with partnerships and programming. You can just build from that and include it. So housing is a super rich opportunity. And we really got engaged with Too Small to Fail and Talking is Teaching. We were drawn in by our local library partners who were strong programming partners for us, but we'd never done anything around the built environment. And they wanted us to do a Talking is Teaching pilot. You can advance to the next slide. So we decided to go for a community that is small and was slated for redevelopment. This property is Deacon Court. It's just 40 apartments on 5 acres, very spacious. We knew we were going to redevelop it to bring more housing and more apartments into this community. Portland is facing a huge housing crisis. So we had this testing ground. And you can go ahead and advance to the next slide. This just gives a little bit of statistics about who's at this property. 2 to 3 bedrooms. It's mostly families living here, 68 children. So this lovely slide shows you what we were beginning with. We knew we wanted to liven up the built environment. We knew this property would be redeveloped in the future. And we also had another key ingredient. We had staff and community members at this site that were already super invested in educational programming and partnerships, and who were energetic about the opportunity to do something new. So this is one of 2 playgrounds at Deacon Court. And it was basically an eyesore. I mean, complete with broken swing and all. Had this big concrete wall that was often tagged with graffiti, and just not a warm or welcoming environment for the community. And so we saw it as just an incredible canvas to begin to think about how can we liven up this space. So what we did was, we knew we were going to partner with Talking is Teaching. Can you advance to the next slide? It's possible that you cannot hear me. There we go. Thank you. It's possible that, okay, so we knew we wanted to do something different to liven up the space, and we engaged our most incredible partners at this site to begin to plan how to build a mural on this wall. And one of the first things we did was engage parents. I know we've been talking about engaging parents. And we brought in a handful of parents that spoke both English and Spanish, and began looking at the different cool sign templates that Talking is Teaching had, but really talked with them about what messages would resonate with you. What do you want to see in your community? What do you want to get talking with your kids about? And we used that information to actually design the signs we created. You can advance to the next slide. So that ugly concrete wall turned into something beautiful, where we were able to bring the signs in. There's one, let's talk about feelings. We definitely had one that was talking about rain. We live in Portland, and you can see this is not a huge amount of resource that we put in here. There was time put into the painting, but simple paint and signs made a big impact. You can advance to the next slide. So we brought signs, we put them along the wall. You can keep advancing. And had those signs in both English and Spanish, and that engagement created, that engagement with parents really created buy-in for spreading the message about what these signs in the community were all about. And we further engaged those parents to really talk with their neighbors. We compensated one parent to do additional outreach. Once we kicked the project off, we had a parent going door to door to further educate families about these simple concepts of talking and playing and some of the science behind the brain development. And it was kind of those neighbor to neighbor conversations that really built buy-in amongst the parents. And I would say our key lessons learned, you can advance to the next slide, were that simple things that don't cost a lot of money make a huge impact. One of the most impactful things we did was paint a hopscotch along the path leading to the community services office. That hopscotch was utilized so much by the community. And this was something that our maintenance crew did. It was an in-house job. They painted it, they put the letters on it. And of the few things that we did, this was the most, I would say, one of the most impactful and most frequently used by children. They would use those letters as stems for words. They would use chalk, playing regular hopscotch, playing word games, reciting the alphabet. This was one of the most impactful things we did. So one of our lessons learned is simple shifts, small amounts of resources, and even limited numbers of partners. This was just home forward in the library. It can really make a big impact. We also learned that young children are often accompanied by their older siblings, not just caregivers. And so that was a key learning. And so we knew we want in future, we want to incorporate youth into our conversations about how to enliven the built environment. You can advance to the next slide. We know that we're getting ready to expand Deacon Court, and I'll cruise through these pretty quickly. We're going from 40 households to 187 households. We are bringing hundreds of children into this new community. You can advance to the next slide. And it is just going to be an incredible blank slate for us to leverage what we learned at this very small project that had a large impact and really bring it to scale. You can advance to the next slide. Just to get a sense of what this redeveloped community is going to look like. We have some renderings. We'll break ground in just a couple of months. And this is what the new Deacon Court will look like. You can show the next slide even. We'll have a basketball court, action ball, and ways that we can paint on this, the basketball court to bring a whole host of learning opportunities. And the sky is really the limit. So we are kind of at the beginning of our partnership with Too Small to Fail and looking forward to all that we can do in this new, large, redeveloped community to really not only engage families and young people in what we're doing here, but also to connect them. And I'll stop there because I know we've got some other amazing panelists. Thank you so much, Ralph.
Relationship and the spaces that we use say very much about the quality of the relationship and about the quality of the respect that children and families, especially those living in disinvested neighborhoods, are shown. And so when I see that photo, I know there's something special going on, and I know that the specialness of that is going to be felt by the families who are reached, who participate, who are engaged. So I really want to thank you for that. And as I'm thanking you, I'm going to hold off on my 10 questions and go directly to Scott. And Scott, I know you're with this landscape structures, which apparently I didn't know very much about it before, but you've got over 50,000 playgrounds all around the world. You know, I'm astounded by the number. But given that work and given that reach, why here? Why now? Why too small to fail? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, that's a great question, Ralph. Thank you. Landscape Structures actually was brought to Too Small to Fail through one of our other partners, which we heard earlier in the program today, Inclusion Matters by Shane's Inspiration. And our mission around our projects with Inclusion Matters is about creating the most inclusive play spaces we possibly can. And one of the ways to do that was to start to think that we're already bringing parents, caregivers, and children together on the playgrounds. How can we also start to go from not just physical inclusion and social inclusion, but let's start to think about how literacy can be impacted on the playground. So if you go to the next slide, I'm just going to show some visuals of how we're accomplishing that. And we started in 2015 with an agreement to bring this type of visual communication, multilingual, to playgrounds through our Inspiration Matters partnership. And the original thought was that we were going to do about 20 total projects as part of that. But as you start to go to the next slide, what we started to see is that the impact of not just having the talking is teaching message alongside of the playgrounds, but we started to see that actually incorporating it onto the play structures brought parents and caregivers together more closely with their children. And when you go to the next slide, we even took that a step further and started to create larger messages sprinkled throughout the entire playground space. And the idea really caught on, and we had the opportunity to bring Jane Park to one of our annual sales meetings and really introduce this message of bringing early literacy onto the playground. And if you go to the next slide, all of our reps from around the world really bought into the idea and really started to challenge us on how could we not just make these visual prompts to start that conversation, but also add a little bit more of the tactile elements. And how can we even take the next level and add the ability to add some STEM conversations as part of that. So it really started to take off, and it really became part of our inclusive play message. Inclusion is about, again, children of all abilities being able to play together, but one of the things is communicating. And so we wanted to take that to the next level. And if you go to the next slide, we started to really incorporate that into everything that we do. So as we start to develop new ideas and new products for the playground, we're introducing literacy elements into all aspects of our early childhood playground. So our 0 to 23 months, our 2 to 5 year olds. And if you go to the next slide, you can start to see how all of these pieces really start to come together, where it's an opportunity for learning. Children are getting to interact with these play elements and start to truly interact. And then the real punchline at the end of my time here is that those 20 original playgrounds that we all talked about has grown into over 860 playgrounds have now incorporated this Too Small to Fail, talking is teaching message. And it's just continuing to grow as more people are exposed to it. It's truly making a huge impact on that, bringing that message and meeting kids where they are, which, as we know, a lot of time is on the playground. So we're super excited about the partnership that we've had, and hearing even how Rachel has really brought that same idea, bringing this kind of idea to the playground is really important and really powerful, Ralph.
Scott, I've got to tell you, I got a note from our technical team saying, look, should we hide your notes? And I'm like, no, I want to take notes. So I've been taking notes, but I must admit, I haven't taken the notes since you began talking, because I am absolutely mesmerized by the photos. This is 800 and how many?
Over 860 and continuing to grow.
This is really amazing. And a recent conversation I had with Kaboom really pushed me toward thinking about playgrounds, and I'm looking forward. I'm almost ready to find a grandchild so I can go back to the playground. If anybody wants to volunteer, I'm here. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Ralph.
Danielle, let me turn to you and the work you're doing for and with United for Brownsville. Tell us a little bit about that, because as we think about grocery stores, many of us don't begin by seeing grocery stores as places for learning. And you do. Tell us. I can't hear you, Danielle. I hope it's me and not you. Danielle, we may need a little technical assistance here.
I can hear everyone, but no audio. Okay,
we can hear you now.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. So hi everyone. Danielle Augustine, project manager for United for Brownsville. Thanks, Ralph. Thank you everybody for the invitation to join today's panel. Really quickly, United for Brownsville is a family-led collaboration transforming the early childhood systems in Brownsville, Brooklyn, which is in New York, so that all children are able to flourish. Next slide, please. So a little bit about Learning Landscapes. It was inspired, of course, by Talking is Teaching. We partnered with Too Small to Fail to create signs to transform 2 grocery stores in Brownsville. Parents have shared how difficult it is to shop with your children. They often want to touch things, grab things off the shelves. They become really fidgety. And so we wanted to create a fun learning shopping experience for families. So we partnered with 2 grocery stores, Food Bazaar and Cherry Valley in Brownsville, to install over 30 signs in each store. Next slide, please. So here's a bit about our process. We started with character selection. We began selecting a character. Our FAB is our family advisory board. They looked at the characters. They didn't really find a character that was really reflective of Brownsville, and they wanted to create their own. And so we hired some local designers, and at the bottom of the screen in the middle, that is Blake, the Brownsville Bumblebee, who is named after Blake Avenue in Brooklyn and created by our FAB. And he is available on the Talking is Teaching website for any community on the call that want to use him. We then moved on to design and print. We wanted to, because we use new characters, different characters, we had to recreate our signs. And so we have the bunny, the frog, the cat, and the spider. And then our FAB went into the local grocery stores and installed the signs across 2 days. We then held a launch event with lots of families, Too Small to Fail, service providers, funders, grocery store employees who are actually our trusted messenger. And lastly, we had our evaluation process, which actually involved 2 of our FAB members becoming data collectors and being able to interact with the families at the stores and collect information. Last slide, please. So these are a few of the photos from our installation and our launch event. This project is really for the community, by the community. Our Family Advisory Board dreamt of this project and wanted to be a part of every part of the process, and they were. And it's really amazing to see the project come to life and all the signs in the stores, and the families and the store managers and the employees really, really love the project. So thanks, Ralph, and thanks again to Too Small to Fail.
And Daniel, thanks so much. You know, earlier last week, I spent a little bit of time with a partner, Vision to Learn. And what they do is they really work on making sure that kids who need glasses get glasses. And there's this wonderful moment when a kid puts on that first pair of glasses and they see the world differently. There's this moment of joy and wonder. And I must admit that this presentation about grocery stores, as like with playgrounds and housing, really is like, it's like that magic moment of putting on that pair of glasses, because we see them differently than we did just a moment ago. And I really want to say thank you. And you know, you're all blowing up the chat box for the guidance and inspiration and helping us to envision something quite different. Thanks. Brian, you're a cleanup hitter this afternoon, and as you could tell, I'm paying attention to baseball as my Phillies go into this September swoon. But Brian, as a cleanup hitter, you've really been the person that's gotten a whole lot of us interested in this phenomenal partnership that the Coin Laundry Association and the Laundry Cares Foundation have shared with Too Small to Fail. Tell us a little bit about the why, the what, the who, and how it's working.
Well, thank you, Ralph, and thank you for all the inspiration along the way. You've been with us through all these summits over the last few years. Well, for us, it came down to really a desire to give back to the families that support our businesses as a way of trying to pay that back in these communities. And you ask why laundromats, we've come to better understand there's really 4 quick factors. 1, proximity to need. I'd love to overlay Dr. Boynton Jarrett's data over laundromat locations in those neighborhoods. I think we see a lot of alignment. The trip to a laundromat is long dwell times. It's not a 5-minute pop-in, it's an hour to 2-hour stay. So we have an opportunity to really engage with kids. These are recurring visits every Tuesday afternoon, every Saturday morning, almost like a classroom schedule. And we've got entrepreneurs that want to make a difference. They want to give back to the communities because it's both the right thing to do and it's good for business. And in this next photo, you can see that a lot of our free laundry and literacy day events are really focused on trying to bring that message, across to the community with, next slide, please, with free laundry services, free soap, free food, book distribution, and connections with local literacy advocates like CGLR. What you see here is a ribbon cutting on one of our family replay learn centers. So that's a big part of our work too, to make sure that we're leaving that installation behind to have impact beyond just the free laundry day. And so these spaces, as you've seen, are a magnet for the kids, and it really gives them an opportunity to take an otherwise mundane visit and make something special out of it. The next slide really shows how these events have become more like a community fair with more resources beyond just the free laundry. Our event just a few weeks ago in Denver, not only were we privileged to do more than 14,000 pounds of free laundry for about 100 families, we were also able to serve about 300 meals, distribute over 700 books, and share 6,000 free diapers in the community there. So it's a real connection point that we want to continue to build on. And in the next slide, of course, it's all about seeing those smiles on those faces. But what I pay attention to is the smiles on the faces of the parents and caregivers. It's a real expression of care. And in their day-to-day lives, they're not always seeing a lot of expressions of care. And maybe the last place they were looking for that is at the laundromat. So it's our privilege to try to deliver on that. And in the next slide, you can see that we're just taking an empty corner and upcycling it, right? There are just some random things there in the corner. Can we make it something lovely? Can we make it something impactful? Can we really use this as an expression of care for our customers every day? And last, in this next photo, you can see that adding the elements of play really elevates the whole experience. So we can have fun while we're at it. Yeah, we know that the kids are going to be that much more dialed in. And we're very excited about the summit this year because we're seeing this expansion into more and more everyday spaces. And one of the everyday spaces in the next slide that we're really excited to share are the family and juvenile court installations that we saw in the video earlier. So we're seeing this idea expand, as you said, meeting families where they are. And that's really how we want this mission to continue to grow and share. For us, it's a way that we're all going to do more business. We're going to have an impact on a lot of kids and really a higher sense of purpose for our enterprise, beyond the balance sheet. So it really is a win for all of us. And we're just so thankful to be doing this work together and can't wait to see where we go next.
Well, Brian, I love this notion of converting dwell time to learning. And I know you have a really elegant way of saying that. And I quoted you a whole lot of times on this notion that dwell time has value and it's usually undisclosed, underappreciated value. And you have really changed the way we think about it. And when I say you've inspired us, that's not just the demands of courtesy. It is true. And as the Campaign for Grade Level Reading has launched, and then there's a process of putting together a coalition to launch our Everyday Places and Spaces Learning Happens Everywhere initiative. We really have been inspired by you and appreciate very much that we've been joined by you and your co-conspirator, the half of the Patty Jane dynamic duo. And I am delighted to have a chance to wind up this particular panel, not only to say thank you to all four of you, but to pass the baton to Jane Park, the director of Too Small to Fail, and the engine behind so much of the work that we've all been doing. Jane?
Thank you, Brian. And thank you, Ralph, so much for the very kind introduction. Ralph, thank you for your partnership and your wise counsel over the years as our Too Small to Fail advisor, and just for your time to moderate this truly, truly wonderful conversation. Thanks also to our wonderful panelists and our speakers today, and to our amazing audience. You all have been so engaged in our chat, and we've so appreciated all the wonderful questions and comments and insights that you shared, and just interest in partnering. We're very grateful, and to all who have also joined through our Facebook Live and other platforms. Thank you so much for being here. And hi, Brian. What an incredible day, right?
Wow, 2 hours goes fast, Jane.
Yes, when we're having fun and learning and being inspired. Well, I have to say all the presentations and conversations shared today really moved me and inspired me. And Ralph, I took some notes here as well. And one of the quotes that I wrote down, I believe it was from Veronica. She said, "I am a mom and I have needs and I need to bring my kids." And so when we think of some of these spaces where families have to bring their kids and are bringing their kids, it really makes me think about the role that we can play in making sure from the moment they enter the door, they feel valued, that they feel cared for, and they feel welcome. And I think Dr. Renee Joyton-Jarrett said it so well when she talked about the importance of not just listening, but listening differently. And I hope, our hope is that as we continue our work together, we continue to listen and to reimagine, not for, but with families and parents like Veronica, Athenia, Deborah, Dustin, Lisa, Natrina, and so many others who just shared so vulnerably and powerfully today about their lived experiences and their hopes and wishes for their neighborhood. I also love what Dr. Boynton Jarrett shared today about the need, especially during this time, for boundless amounts of compassion, boundless amounts of partnership, sparking innovative responses, homegrown solutions within communities. And I think the presentation just shared by Rachel and Scott, you, Brian, and Danielle are just truly powerful examples of this. And I mean, you know, where else could an idea like Blake the Bumblebee come from? Created by and with the community. So Ralph, as you also said, I hope we all leave today's session with new glasses. I have to say, since we engaged in this work, I can't look at a sidewalk or a storefront or the side of a wall or a city intersection in the same way. And I hope that we all leave here today with big imaginations on ways that we can transform every corner and every space in our neighborhoods to be filled with opportunities for learning. On that note, if we can just share a slide, I just want to close with a little exercise from just to be able to hear from all of you on your reflections on what you wonder about. Is there anything you wonder about today? Is there anything you wish for? I just shared a little bit about kind of some of the things that I've wondered about and wish for. And as we, as you know, please feel free to share in the chat box. We would love to hear from you. But I will share that today is actually Korean Thanksgiving Day, and as a daughter of Korean immigrants to New Jersey 40 years ago, you know, Korean Chuseok is all about giving thanks for the bountiful harvest of our work and those of our ancestors, but it's also a day when we hope that the next year is better than the last. And so I think what I have to say, being here with all of you gives me great hope. Being here with all of you who've shown up to learn and share and ask questions. We're so grateful for everything that you've shared today. We would love, oh, thank you. I see some kind wishes here. Thank you for everything you've shared. I hope we can just try to read through very quickly. But thank you so much for your time. We would love to stay connected. And here are some ways we can do that. Please share questions and reflections on our event app. Just been checking the wall here, and there are tons of comments and posts. So please continue to share. All of the resources referenced today are on the resources section of our event app. So we encourage you to check it out along with the recording from today's session. And we also include contact information for other participants. So please, we'd love for this to spark connections and conversations and boundless partnerships. So please use the app to connect with others. And I will hand it over to you, Brian, to share a little bit about what we can expect on day 2.
Well, yeah, thanks so much, Jane. In your friendship, your partnership in this journey has really been indispensable and so valuable to really everyone listening. So thank you so much for that, as always. And I'll make it quick because we're down to the end of our hour here, but I just want to make sure that you join us again on Thursday, this next Thursday, September 23rd, same time, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern, for our second session that is also jam-packed with a lot of inspirations around the theme of reimagining environments and everyday spaces. So today kind of framed out the challenges and the issues that we need to address. And we're going to be talking some more on Thursday about how to really get after the work of making those things happen. So we'll be talking about those environments. We'll be talking about building those communities. And yes, my favorite, we'll be making another trip to the laundromat as we did last year. So please join us for that. In the meantime, as Jane said, use the app, share your thoughts with the hashtag Reimagine Together 2021, and can't wait to see you on Thursday.
And before we close out, we do have a very special message from kind of an unexpected special guest, Coy Bowles, who is the lead guitarist of the 3-time Grammy Award-winning Zac Brown Band, If anyone has some favorite songs from Zach Brown Band, please share. But we have a very special message from Coy, who is also an incredible education advocate, supporting teacher appreciation. That's right, Chicken Fried, great song. And wanted to share a few words of encouragement and inspiration for us here today. Thank you all again for joining, and look forward to seeing you on September 23rd.
Hello, everyone. I'm Coy Bowles. You may know me as a musician and a member of the 3-time Grammy Award-winning Zach Brown Band. I'm so proud to be a part of the movement led by Too Small to Fail and Laundry Cares Foundation, and so many of you here today to help make sure that every child has access to fun, playful, and welcoming environments to learn and thrive. So why, may you ask, is a musician here at a national early learning conference? Well, I also happen to be a children's book author, and I've devoted over the last 10 years of my life of being an education advocate focused on supporting literacy, early childhood education, and social emotional development. And I strongly believe that I was put on earth to share my creativity for writing books, sharing my stories, and playing and writing music to help kids. And most importantly, I am a proud husband and a dad of 2 beautiful young girls named Hattie and Millie Mercy Bolts. So as an advocate and as a dad, I can't thank you enough for just showing up to listen, showing up to care, and showing up to learn how we can all make a difference. That's how my journey started to support early education in the first place, just by being curious and learning about what role I can play as a musician and a storyteller to help kids thrive. So during today's session, we heard some powerful and emotional stories directly from parents, researchers, and educators about the state of neighborhoods our nation's kids are growing up in. We learned about the inequities that exist in families' access to safe, family-friendly, learning-rich environments that we know help kids thrive. So being a touring musician has also given me this kind of weird window into the world. And I've seen firsthand the stark differences in the quality of environments our kids are growing up in. Just as I travel a few miles within the same city, it's night and day how the neighborhood conditions can change. And one thing, looking back, I'll never forget about my own childhood is a small door that my great Aunt Millie built for the kids in our family. Literally a little door that led into an attic playroom of her home. We knew this door was reserved just for us. What I realize now is that little door sent a message to me that I was special to her and that I was also loved and cared for. It also sparked our imagination, since the little door was our portal into fun new discoveries that we got into every day. That little door also became the title and series focus of the children's books that I'm writing, called Behind the Little Red Door. And speaking of words we can share with our kids, we know how important it is for them to have caring and supporting adults in their lives. Well, I had a teacher in my life named Mr. Tom Sullivan, and I'll never forget the way he looked me straight in the eyes one day and said, "Coy, there's something different about you. You have a lot to offer this world, and I personally believe in you." So it's the words from Mr. Sullivan, it's that little door my great aunt carved out for me that sent me a very clear and powerful message. And it continues to have a great influence on my life, my calling, and the work that I create today as an adult. So as we close out day 1 of our summit, I'd like to encourage everyone to reflect on some of the stories we heard today. Think about how we can each play a role to make our neighborhoods a more welcoming, more beautiful, more learning-rich environment for our kids. What can we do to each imagine or create that will send a message to the parents that they are valued and supported in their role? And as we learn from the speakers today, there are so many creative ways we can just reach all the families, just in everyday places that they go to together, whether it's the laundromat, the playground, or the grocery store. And I can't think of a better, more diverse and passionate group than all of you joined here today to do this work and help parents recognize that learning really can happen everywhere. So thank you so much for taking time to hear my story. And I'm excited to keep learning and listening along with you on day 2 of our summit on September 23rd. Thank you.